How would you feel if one of the most important battles of your life actually took place within your own imagination? I'm Dre, and this is The Midnight Hour. Tonight, we are going to be looking at Haruki Murakami and his incredibly surreal short story, Super Frog Saves Tokyo. And this story centers around a loan officer named Katagiri. Katagiri is an average individual, incredibly average. He has a mundane job. He lives a mundane life. And he comes home one day to an extraordinary situation. And that is to find a 6-foot giant speaking frog in his apartment. So we're already off to the races at this point. And what frog, as this frog insists to be called, what frog informs Katagiri of is that in 3 days' time, there is going to be a massive earthquake in Tokyo. And this earthquake will be caused by a darkness embodied within an underground worm who goes by the title of Worm. And basically, Katagiri and Frog are to descend underground and go to battle with Worm so that this earthquake is completely averted and just does not happen. As you can imagine, Katagiri is bewildered and does not believe his eyes, his ears. He doesn't believe what this situation is really entailing. Katagiri has no choice but to be on board at this point. So on the evening of their supposed meeting to go underground, Katagiri is actually shot in the shoulder. He wakes up in the hospital. A nurse informs him that it's actually the day that Frog told Katagiri the earthquake would happen. Katagiri can't believe it. He says, "There's been no earthquake?" The nurse says no. Frog shows up again, informs Katagiri of how well the fight went, and thanks Katagiri for his help. Katagiri can't believe it because he doesn't remember being a part of the fight. He remembers being shot. Towards the end of the story, Frog morphs into these boils that pop open, turn into a slew of insects. Katagiri screams, and a nurse comes back in the room, says, "Oh, you must have had another nightmare." She basically just lulls Katagiri to sleep with another injection, and that's how the story ends. So obviously we're in for a wild analysis, but I have highlighted 3 sections, 3 excerpts that I think kind of show where my thought process is on this story. The first is Frog showing up in Katagiri's office, and Katagiri being very nervous that other people are not going to understand what's going on. However, the excerpt goes, "Don't worry," Frog said. "You are the only one who can see me. But now I am sure you realize that I actually exist. I am not a product of your imagination. I can take action and produce results. I am a real living being." Now, I should probably jump into where I believe this whole story is really going, and that is that Frog represents light, goodness, simple truth, honest truth. And Worm is the exact opposite. He's darkness. He's borderline evil. And those two sides of the equation exist in all of us. Okay, we all have shadows, we all have the light. What I feel like Frog is saying right there is that he's not just in Katagiri's imagination. He can produce results if Katagiri gives in to the light. If he accepts that lightness in him, he can represent Frog's intentions. Which, this all sounds really strange, I know. But here's the second quote. Frog says, "It is a matter of responsibility and honor. You may not be too crazy about the idea, but we have no choice. You and I must go underground and face Worm. If we should happen to lose our lives in the process, we will gain no one's sympathy. And even if we manage to defeat Worm, no one will praise us. No one will ever know that such a battle even raged far beneath their feet. Only you and I will know, Mr. Katagiri. However it turns out, ours will be a lonely battle." This all points to Katagiri having these two opposite sides within him, and him having to face down the darkness. Remember, he lives a very mundane life. He feels very sidelined. His family has turned their backs on him, even though he's always been there for his brother and sister. His parents are no more. He has no wife. He has no children. So basically, it is his lightness versus his darkness. And that's where I think the fight really is. The third quote kind of is a summation of that idea, and it says, "The whole terrible fight occurred in the area of imagination. That is the precise location of our battlefield. It is there that we experience our victories and our defeats." Now that's basically giving life to that theory, that this battle that Frog and Katagiri are supposed to have against Worm is taking place within the imagination. And that is Katagiri's imagination. And even though he may be subconscious, sleeping in the hospital in that very moment, there's this fight that rages within him. There is this lightness against darkness. And when he wakes up and realizes that he and Frog have victoriously defeated Worm, he's changed, he's become even better. Because the very last sentence is that the nurse asks, "You were very fond of Frog, weren't you, Mr. Katagiri?" Katagiri says, "More than anybody." And so that shows a certain sentimental side of this character that we hadn't seen up until that point. He's very average. Remember, he's very, very average. And he even asks Frog, "Why me? Why do you need me to help you save Tokyo?" Frog says, "You're the exact type of person I do need to help save Tokyo, because you are so responsible, you're so courageous, you're so brave. You do the things other people hate doing. You show up. And I want to save Tokyo for people like you." This story is for the average person about the average person. And an average person isn't so average. I mean, we all have lightness and darkness. And I really feel like that's what Frog and Worm represent, respectively. So that's just my take on it. I could be completely off. Murakami is a very unique writer. I haven't read much of his work other than After the Quakes collection. So to answer the introduction's question, what would we do if the most important battle that we had to fight was fought within our imagination? And I think the answer to that is that we would fight very, very hard, because the root of who we are starts and begins within our imagination. It is what gives life to our actions, to our opinions, our energy, the way we treat ourselves and the way we treat others. whatever is at our core, at the nucleus of that imaginative battleground, and whichever side of us wins, either frog or worm, then that's who we become, at least for that moment. And this story, I'm not sure why a lot of things that happen within it happen, but I do know that at the end, Katagiri is changed for the better. He feels like he's done something huge because he has, according to the story, he's saved Tokyo with Frog. And that's something that has raised him up from the mundane and from the average to something incredibly special. And that's something we can all do. We may not all have to fight a huge giant underground worm with a 6-foot giant frog on our side, but we can all take note from this story and become something special. And that's just my whole take on it. Again, I could be completely off. Next week, we will be looking at what it means when perfection and the quest for perfection results in death itself. Like if you felt something, comment if you wrote something, and I will see you next Sunday at the midnight hour.